Welcome, dear viewers, to a new episode of Around Kuwait. We'll be sharing with you everything that happens around Kuwait. But for today, we have a really special guest that join us in Around Kuwait. Before we starting our episode, let's welcome my dear colleague Abdulaziz. So welcome, Abdulaziz.
Welcome to you. I'd like to welcome working crew. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us today in this new episode of your show already Around Kuwait. Usually we share with you the latest event and event that is happening, and sometimes even today we have a distinguished guest. We're going to talk about different aspects. But you know, dear viewers watching us through the KTV2, today our guest, he's a pioneer of his field. He's already been studying already, we call it the biology in St. Louis University. Then he been through too many different aspects. He already volunteered in the Kuwaiti Zoo, and even he's still now working in the wild researcher in Kisser. And by the way, Sarah, you are a big fan of wildlife?
I'm a big fan of wildlife. As our dear guest for today, he's a big fan of wildlife. As we mentioned, Abdulaziz, he studied biology actually, and ecology and much more. We're going to talk about his volunteering and voluntary work in the zoo and also in the wildlife field and much more. So let's welcome with great pleasure Mohammed Al-Saiq. So welcome.
Much. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much for joining us in our show Around Kuwait. Usually in our show we have a distinguished guest. We're going to talk about different aspects. We already present to you one of the proud of Kuwait, and you graduate from St. Louis University for like as we call it a major. That time it's different than now. Now it's like high demand, biology, ecology, and even more. Right. Can you mention about this part of your life in your journey when you studied biology?
So initially I started out going to dental school, but I didn't find myself in that field, so I switched over to biology, and the ecological aspect of just ecology in general really pulled me, because in Kuwait after the Gulf War, as you know, our environment was decimated.
Yes.
So we needed people to start rebuilding, start renovating, if you will, the desert ecosystem as well as the marine ecosystem. So I found myself pulled towards studying something that might help Kuwait and revitalizing the desert in terms of the wildlife.
Amazing. See, he said like he started to go to dental, then the destiny and himself decide to go to
biology. So
yeah.
You studied in St. Louis University.
Yes.
So we'd like to know what's your time back then in the St. Louis University? How actually university shaped your life, or let's say shaped your passion of the biology?
Honestly, it was a remarkable experience.
Yes.
There was so much going on. There were a lot of classes that I loved taking in terms of population ecology, so studying the groups of certain animals and how they interact with their environment.
Yes.
One specific course that really pulled me was when we studied river ecosystems. So we went out into the woods for 3 weeks, lived in a cabin,
wow.
and we were catching
studying
fish,
wildlife?
Studying wildlife in the middle of the forest for 3 weeks. And even though we were focusing on the fish in the rivers, we had one professor that would every morning for breakfast bring in a few snakes that he found around the forest, non-venomous, but we would sit around, he would tell us a bit about them, and we would just marvel at these different animals.
I can imagine, Aziz, after your trip in the forest, your passion became more and more, let's say?
Definitely. It really inspired me to keep going with what I'm doing.
So just to go with the flow, when you mentioned you've been in this camping outside and you are hunting, and your professor is like the hunting, well, on behalf of us, I'd like to say hi to him. So he was hunting snakes, but do you mention something, there is something link between their desert life and the Kuwaiti desert life, like especially for the animals?
Yes, when it comes to the basics, animals have certain rules that they follow. So they're always looking for food, they're always looking for shelter, and they're always looking for a mate.
Okay.
So different, no, for a partner.
Okay.
Meat sometimes depends on if they're carnivores. So when we're looking at the animals in St. Louis in the US, or we're looking at Kuwaiti animals, they share similar aspects. They do live in different environments, so they do show different characteristics. For example, our animals are a little paler in color because they blend in with the desert ecosystem better that way. So they can hide from prey if they're trying to pounce on them, or they can hide from predators that might try to eat them. But in the forest you find them a little bit more colorful, or striped, or blended of different colors, because it mimics the light coming in through the leaves of the canopy. It mimics the different colors that you would find in a forest that's you don't find in desert ecosystems.
So we can say mission cactus, and also we call it big palms of the trees in Europe and Latin.
This is how to differentiate the wildlife in Europe and here in Kuwait. So in your role as equality, health, safety, you've been working as an environmental, let's say, officer in Kisser, isn't it?
Yes, so I did work for a little bit as a quality officer, or a quality and health and safety officer at Kisser. So our role was to monitor the different aspects of the labs at Kisser to make sure that they are adhering to Kisser's regulations in terms of making sure the labs are safe for their employees, everything is kept hygienic, there's no to prevent any kind of accidents from happening in the lab.
So when you mentioned about the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research, Sarah, it's one of the big building, and we usually Kuwait TV showcasing more about the pioneers who are researching there. You mentioned like you are a quality officer, and in the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research, I know it's a big area for research. What about your thesis? I know you have a big things you're researching every day. Can you share something to us exclusive to around Kuwait?
Honestly, I can't get into too much detail in terms of what's going on at work, but there are a lot of projects that the Kisser is working on, as well as other government organizations and some NGOs that are dealing with trying to restore Kuwait's environment. That in terms of either revegetating Kuwait or reintroducing the native wildlife, the animals that have gone either extinct or nearing extinction. So my role in Kisser is to kind of help understand the ecosystem, the challenges they're facing, and a lot of the ways, and we're testing different ways to try to reduce the impact or human impact on these animals and on these plants.
So Sarah, he mentioned something important about the challenge of the ecosystem, and even the birds and the animals who are traveling all around the world, and Kuwait is one of the destinations of it.
One of the destinations. That's why we've been working, like, let's say, as a scientific research, and also we've been working in Al Hayat actually team. As a volunteer. So we'd like to know more about the project you've been working in your voluntary work in Hayat team.
So Hayat Wildlife Team is an NGO, a non-government organization, and we are focused on trying to assist the government organizations in promoting awareness for different animals and plants that we have in Kuwait, ways to preserve them, and trying to come up with ways to restore what was lost for whatever reason. So we've done many different community awareness sessions. We've had a few different talks. We've participated in a few different organizations and events where we kind of try to educate mainly the younger generation, because they are the future. They're the ones that need to learn now so that we can make sure that we have a future for them to look forward to and to work towards.
And that's amazing. He mentioned about the Hayat, so they held too many events, and they participate in too many different organizations. Can you mention to me one of the important events you already participate with Hayat team, and the workshops you already holding in this kind of events?
So we've had Dr. Sarah Al-Atiji and Ms. Nof Al-Hashash. Both gave lectures on the importance of the various plants in Kuwait. They've given it to multiple times, and they've talked about the medicinal properties of some of these plants, and as well as the cultural heritage of these plants. So some of these plants that we have, our grandparents or even our parents used to eat them with their meals. They used to make salads out of them, or they would make balms and different kind of pastes for medicines, for healing wounds, for any kind of burns. So a lot of this is kind of lost in today's generation.
Yes.
So they talked a lot about that. I personally gave a lecture to KFAS students. There was an event called Sufara al-Tabi'a, or
So the ambassador of the environment.
nature ambassadors,
Nature.
yes.
Amazing.
So I gave them a talk as to just to educate them on what animals are present in Kuwait and which ones have gone extinct. So they were amazed to know that we have hedgehogs, we have hyenas that come by from time to time, and wolves. A lot of these animals, they don't associate with our desert because they're used to thinking it's just snakes and lizards and that's about it. But no, we have a diversity of birds, from flamingos to kingfishers to owls and eagles, as well as bats and all these different things.
Yes.
So it's one of the positives of Hayat is actually seeing the smiles and the bewildered eyes of these students learning.
So being Mr. Mohammed like a scientific researcher and also in a public awareness, it's really challenging to manage to do both of the aspects in Hayat Wildlife team. So I'd like to know about your secret, how actually you get like manage to do both.
As the quote goes, if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life, right?
Yes.
So for me, my passion is working with animals. It always has been. I grew up with pets all my life, so being out and working with animals is second nature to me.
Yes.
And so whenever I'm talking about animals, it's stuff that I've read just because I wanted to read, not because I had to read for school or anything like that. So when I'm talking about it, I'm excited. I want to spread on this knowledge that I have. And I think my enthusiasm is what attracts people, because they seem to ask more questions as to, oh, I didn't know we have so-and-so animal. Can you tell me, how does it work? We didn't expect it to find it in Kuwait. How does it live? And they're surprised to know that the answer is different than how they live abroad.
Yes.
So managing the two wasn't that hard, to be honest.
Sarah, I am very curious to give him multiple questions.
Okay.
Too many things comes to my mind right now. When you mention about the KFAS event, when you ambassador of nature, I know kids are already attending, and you're mentioning to the kids about the hyenas and the flamingos and the birds, and they are surprised. How do you see the interaction with the kids that time? I know KFAS always aiming for the young generation, and you are expert and you are ambassador of nature. How they are interacting with you?
So they had a lot of questions. So it was
like me also.
Feel free to ask. So they were enticed to know what animals we had, and then they were curious to know as to what their role was. So even though it was a lecture, I don't like to just give a lecture. If they have questions, I told them to just stop and ask. And they asked so many questions that we were running out of time, and the KFAS kept telling me, okay, we got to speed this along. But they were very enthusiastic, which is a very bright sign for our future. And these kids were talking about between, I think it was
8, 10?
No, it was more like 9 to about 16.
So from young to teenagers?
To teenagers, yeah. So
and they are wearing the customs and they are wearing the...
Yeah, so it was very exciting to see kids this interested.
Interesting. So let's talk now about the Kuwait Zoo. You must be a really incredible, let's say, experience to you. Been working there like as a volunteer for sure, or as a worker there?
I was there. I was volunteering for about 3 months.
Yes.
And I got a bit of experience in terms of zoo animals. So when you're dealing with zoo animals, it's different than dealing with wild animals because they're brought in from abroad.
Okay.
So their diet is not necessarily what you would find in the wild, because they're kept in captivity.
Yes.
And you have to focus on ways to reduce the stress that they have. So in terms of giving them toys or different ways to play, in terms of stimulating their senses. For example, the wolves that were at Kuwait Zoo, we would think of ways to stimulate their sense of smell. So we would hide their food and let them sniff it out. That way they don't lose their natural abilities, and they still mimic the way they act in the wild in case in the future they're ever released back into the wild.
Nice. So So this is like very interesting topic, Sarah. He's already mentioned to us, Mr. Mohammed Al-Sayiq. But dear viewers, go to this tiny break. We'll continue show around Kuwait with our distinguished guest. Stay tuned.
And we came back again, dear viewers, around Kuwait with our dear guest for today, Mr. Mohammed Al-Sayiq. We are talking about the wildlife, and he's really enthusiastic and also passionate about that. So, Mr. Mohammed, we've been talking about, let's say, the zoo, the Kuwait Zoo, and the animals. You've been, let's say, working with, let's say, you saw too many animals there in the zoo. We'd like to know about the particular animals, or let's say a moment you felt really lasting impression on you, one of the animals you felt really passionate or impression on you.
So for me, I'm drawn towards the carnivores, especially the big cats. So being able to get close to the cheetahs at the zoo was, I don't want to say a dream come true, but it was very exciting to work with them,
Yes.
To study their habitat, to study their food, their feeding behavior, and trying to come up with ways to engage them. I know their enclosure was a little small, but there are ways around that. And so working with the cheetah was probably one of the most exciting experiences I've had. Yeah, for sure.
How was the relationship between, like, now you have like a wild animal in the Kuwait, and every day you are seeing it all the time. You are feeding it, you're studying their behavior. How was the interaction and the relationship between a human and an animal?
So no matter what, the wild animals are always wild. You
Okay.
can't, no matter how you feel towards them, you have to keep that in mind.
You have to be cautious.
Always. So we can't go inside the enclosure thinking that the animal is now accustomed to us. No, we can't even put our hand on the outside of the cage because we don't know what the animal will do.
And we cannot raise them at home, like as a
For
pet.
This is
sure,
important, yes.
for sure. Even though this is first off against the EPA's law.
Yeah.
Okay. Second of all, it's inhumane. These animals need to be roaming free. They need to have their environments and be around other individuals of the same species. So keeping them housed indoors in an environment that's nowhere suitable is just wrong, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of researchers, a lot of legal teams, a lot of people around the world.
So let's elaborate this topic even more, like between the brackets, okay? So wild animals, you see now during in the social media, some people raising wild animals at home or their gardens or even their farms. So according to the EPA law, this is against the law, right?
Yes, this is against the law, and typically we ask the public, if you ever see this, to report it, because it's not only dangerous for the animal, it's dangerous for the people keeping them. You never know when an animal might return to its natural instincts, even if they've raised it as a young cub or a young bird. You never know when it will revert back to its natural instincts, and it might attack a child at home, it might attack its owner. So housing these animals are very difficult and very dangerous. So if anyone has an animal, it would be great to surrender it, to get it back into its natural habitat, because I know they raise, unfortunately, not just the big cats, hyenas, wolves, sometimes even monkeys, lions, baboons are also very vicious and dangerous,
Yes.
and other animals.
Well, thank you for shedding a light on this point, Mr. Mohammed. So you're passionate in wildlife is very obvious. So we'd like to know, how do you think your academic background aligns with the, let's say, your passion in this field?
So I focused mainly on ecology and organismal biology, which is how animal species work in their their environment. How do they affect the plants around them, the other species around them? So my work right now, we're looking at interactions between, let's say, insects and how they pollinate different plants.
Yes.
And we're also looking at how bat species that we have eat insects that can affect the crops that we have. So they're actually reducing our need for pesticides. They're a natural pesticide. We're looking at a few different, a lot of different actually interactions between animals and each other and animals and plants.
Nice. We mentioned before, like during our topics, about when it's against the law to raise a wild animal at home and the challenges. So our working crew asking me, what about the challenges for any family to raising this wild animals, you know? Like now it's already against the law. It's about us. If we are very passionate to keep one wild animal, such as wolves, lions, tigers, and even cheetahs, hyena. So how can the challenges for the families to raising this kind of wild animals?
So again, raising them is illegal, and Kuwait actually has signed up to an international treaty, the CITES, okay, which deals with trading and housing of wild animals. So depending on what animal species it is, you need to get a certificate from this organization that says you can house it, and it's usually, you only get these certificates for educational purposes or for research purposes.
Okay,
only those usually.
Two main pillars.
Those are the main pillars.
Okay.
But if anyone wants to try to import, you have the two main organizations, government organizations in Kuwait, which are the EPA and PAFR.
Okay.
They deal with importing and exporting of animals. So they would be able to help the viewers kind of figure out how to import legally any animals, which animals they are allowed to import, which ones they are not allowed to keep at home or in their farms or anywhere else.
That's amazing.
Nice. So I would like to thank him to share this important notice for everyone, Sarah.
For sure, Aziz. So, Mr. Mohammed, since you studied biology and you are really passionate about wildlife, you've been like a scientific researcher for wildlife. We'd like to know how actually do biology and environmental conversation can shape the future of Kuwait.
So the environment shapes not just the animals' homes, it shapes our it really affects humans in multiple ways.
Yes.
So the healthier your environment is, the healthier you will be. Because if you have more plants, you have more creatures that are taking in a lot of the toxins in the air that might be around for whatever reason.
Yes.
If you have more animals about, you have more animals that can pollinate your crops sometimes. You can have more animals that will pollinate even the plants that you find in the streets that are being planted. You have a healthier ecosystem. The healthier your ecosystem, the less likely that you will have diseases being spread. Because even if let's say we have mosquitoes in Kuwait, especially during the humid season, so if we maintain our environment, we'll be able to have bats that can eat these mosquitoes, reducing the amount of bites that humans get and possibly reducing the spread of some of these diseases that they may carry. So by promoting a healthier environment and keeping it safe, we're also keeping ourselves safe. And then when we're looking at right now, we're in the winter, right? Everything is going to the desert and it's camping season.
Yes.
How many, would you rather camp in an area where it's just barren desert or where it's somewhere green and you wake up to a nice view with the sunrise and you see all this green and then maybe a hedgehog walking about, a few jerboas jumping around, some birds, colorful birds nesting in or on the bushes or in the trees. So that's the aim and that's the hope that we look forward to.
And we can actually turn our desert to a green land, let's say, as Mr. Mohammed says. So taking care of the wildlife is taking care of the environment, let's say our environment, and then take care of ourselves as a human being.
In addition, the yellow flowers also as well.
Yes.
What is the name in the Arabic?
النوير.
النوير, yes.
Yes.
So that's why in our show we're always learning something new in around Kuwait. I remember when between the breaks we have a chit chat, we talk about the animals who are traveling. We call it, there is one certain title you mentioned, like immigrants.
Migratory
Migratory.
animals.
Even
Yes.
here we are learning something new in around Kuwait. Migratory. This kind of animals you mentioned to the Hayat, for the Kefas, people didn't know like there is flamingos here, some certain birds are here, and even animals traveling. Let's talk more about the animals who already been here in Kuwait in our habitat.
So
Migratory.
There are a lot of migratory animals. Let's first off, we have migratory birds, and there are two migrations that happen: the spring and the winter migrations.
Okay.
So this is usually around February, March, and October, November, where you'll see lots of birds either migrating north or
Yes,
south,
yes.
for the winter or the summer.
Yes.
And so this is the biggest hub. Kuwait, we house a lot of birds coming in from several different continents. So we have a huge diversity of birds here. What we're also starting to figure out is that not only do birds migrate, we have some animals or some mammals that might migrate. So we're looking at some bat species that possibly move between Kuwait and our neighboring countries, and maybe even into Europe. We're still looking into studying that a little bit more, as well as some of our carnivores. So the caracal, which our viewers might know as the washaq in Arabic, is an animal that during the winter likes to keep a small area, hangs out in a very small area, but in the summer it expands its home range, because usually in the summer there aren't as many animals or plants around, so it's harder to find food. So it can travel from northern Saudi Arabia into Kuwait looking for food in the summer.
Yes.
So it's not, that one's not really a migration, but it's similar as to the other animals that come in and out during certain seasons.
That's interesting.
Interesting, different seasons, different animals. So this kind of animals you already mentioned about the host traveling, it's only about the birds, or there is different certain animals like we call wild animals, desert animals also traveling?
So we have bird species, we have mammal species, and there is possibly even in the ocean some whale species that might be migrate.
During the oceans, huh?
Yeah, from time to time we see, if you've heard on the news, the whale shark that comes into Al Khayran from time to time. That usually only happens during a certain season. So that's possibly a migration in and out, but I can't say for certain on that one.
I'm thinking like this, our guest Muhammad Asakh, sometimes when he heard about some seasons, he's going there to check, right?
Of course, I'm always out there if I can.
That kind of stuff.
That's amazing. We've been learning too many information about wildlife with you, Mr. Muhammad. So we're talking about, let's say you're working in Kisar and also in Hayat Wildlife team. So are there any exciting projects in the near future?
So inshallah, with Hayat's team, we are looking forward to announcing a few new projects coming soon. But recently what we have been working on is studying Felicia Island's diversity.
Okay.
So we've been looking at the different plants that are out there. We're looking at comparing the sizes of the animals found there to the sizes of the animals found on the mainland, which in terms of hedgehogs, it's about double the size, which is amazing, as well as the different animals that might call Felicia home, but not the mainland Kuwait home. So inshallah, we're looking in the future, looking to announce a few
really
amazing things.
interesting project. Yes.
Since he's already wildlife researcher in Kisar, I already mentioned like you being visiting some kind of location for the seasonal animals all the time. So in your point of view, you are expert in the field. Even our working crew, Hamad, is curious also, is telling me also to ask you, is there any certain animals only living in Kuwait, not in any friendly or brotherly countries?
Yes, actually, there is a native or endemic crab species, only found, I believe it's in Slaybakhat Bay.
Okay.
And it's not found anywhere else in the world.
In the world, only in Slaybakhat.
Only in Slaybakhat Bay, from what I've read. I haven't studied this because I focus more on terrestrial side.
We have to thank Hamid. Thank you, Hamid, for this. Yeah.
But yeah, this is important to shed light that there are some animals that are only native to Kuwait, and this is another big reason to protect them, because how proud can you be to say that I've kept this population around in Kuwait and protected it, and this is only found here. So people are coming in from abroad to study what we have, including our corals. So our corals are found all over the world, right? But our coral species specifically are very resistant to heat and high salinity. Yes. So while other coral species around the world are suffering from bleaching and they're starting to die out and turn white, some researchers are starting to study the corals found in the Arabian Gulf to find ways to protect their corals by studying ours.
That's amazing.
So Kuwait, as well as our neighboring countries, have amazing potential, and it's a gold mine in terms of research on the wildlife that can be found in Kuwait and their capabilities to help promote or protect humans and the ecosystem alike.
That's really amazing. It's the first time I'm like hearing this information that we have really unique animals here in Kuwait that has no other in other countries. That's really an amazing, Aziz.
And even something in your mind also, Sarah, like because we're talking about the Kuwait Zoo in the beginning, we talked about the hayat and the animals and even more. So he's been through this kind of things too many times. I'm curious about the challenges he had.
The challenges. So as a biologist actually, so how can you keep yourself like doing what you are doing now, like as a scientific researcher and a wildlife passionate, and also much more you are doing like in voluntary work. So how actually let's talk about the challenges you are facing, how you are managed and confront the challenges.
So a lot of challenges is sometimes you want to focus on a lot of different animals or a lot of different plants at the same time.
Yes.
It's challenging because you can't do it all. So we have to focus on a few what we call keystone species. If we protect these species, by protecting them, a lot of other species will be protected because we're protecting the same habitat.
Yes.
But these keystone species are usually the animals or plants that the people love. So a keystone species, for example, might be the eagle or the falcon because it's big in our culture. Or it could be something cute like a fox or the sand cat, something that the people can relate to. By protecting them, you would also be protecting the plants that it hides in, the prey that it feeds on, and the insects that the prey needs to live to be able to protect it. So by protecting keystone species, by focusing on them, we're able to kind of manage our time, our resources, not burn out trying to keep everything in check.
Amazing. This is like a very interesting information. But dear viewers, first of all, let's go to this tiny break, continue our interesting topic with our guest, Mohammed Al-Sair. Stay tuned.
And we came back again, dear viewers, in around Kuwait with our dear guest, Mr. Mohammed Al-Sair. So, Abdulaziz, we've been chit-chatting with Mr. Mohammed about really an interesting question about the camping, isn't it?
You know, because me and you were curious to go there, we'll go for one good location.
Yes.
I know you have something in your mind. You mentioned in the beginning, better to go camping and you go for keshtas, for a location, have like a green area with nowhere, flowers and green, and also cactus and flower foxes. So give me like the certain common place people like to go there.
Okay, first off,
I know.
just to let you know, cactus are not native to Kuwait.
Yeah,
we won't
yes.
find cactus in our deserts.
Yes.
So people usually go to Subiya now that the marine bridge has been constructed.
Jabal Causeway, Jabal Al-Ahmed Causeway.
Yes, so this is giving people more access to that area. In the past, that has been a beautiful destination. So as soon as the rains start to come, we see some vegetation sprouting, but it isn't until February where we'll see a multitude of colors. So it's what they call Macintosh season, because we see the purple, yellow, green flowers, blues and whites. So it's a remarkable area. But I would like to just promote that people really need to try to reduce the amount of trash that they throw in the area,
Yes.
try to minimize the amount of cars going onto the dirt road,
Yes.
because compacting the soil stops the seeds from being able to sprout.
Yes.
So if they continuously go off road and not stay on the dirt paths, we might lose this diversity. But Sabia is remarkable in terms of the animals that you would find there, especially at night. A lot of them are more active because back in the day there wasn't that much human activity
Yes,
out there.
there
It was a
is.
very long
You have
drive.
Long drive, yes.
Yeah, but now with the causeway, it's a lot easier to get there. So if people are going out there, enjoy it. Try to conserve it for the next trip that you go out there, not just for your kids, but for you next year. And
That's amazing. So Sabia is one of, let's say, most beautiful desert here in Kuwait. So, Mr. Mohammed, being like, we are so proud of you actually being like a scientific,
Thank
let's
you.
say, a researcher, wildlife passionate, and actually I gained too many information, me and our dear viewers. So, let's have some advice from you to our dear viewers or everyone who is really interested in studying or being a researcher in the wildlife.
If you're interested and you still haven't decided on a major and you're in college,
Yes.
look into your sciences. So look into your biology, zoology, botany. These are all majors that we're looking forward to employing at different institutes in Kuwait. This is something that we need to more people to study so we can start working even faster and better in terms of conserving our environment.
Yes.
But if you've already gotten your degree or you're older or you're not entwined towards education, all you need to do is go out there, work with people that are sometimes just hobbyists. So we have people that are birders that love to go out and just look at birds. Even going and sitting with them, not necessarily with researchers, would give you a bit more knowledge and appreciation for the birds coming in and out. They'll be able to teach you a little bit more about the life history or how these birds live their day to day, or any other animal. It doesn't have to be birds. It could be a hobbyist or it could be an NGO. And that Hayat team, we're always looking for people of all walks of life, all different backgrounds, because we work together. No matter what your background is, everybody has a skill that they can contribute to save the ecosystem.
So he mentioned about the contribution, the collaboration. You are working in Kisar as a wildlife researcher. You mentioned about the Hayat you're doing and with the KFAS role and the Kisar role and Environmental Public Authority. As an expert in the field, you are a researcher working on this for a long time, more than 10 years we can say. How do you see the role for the governmental entities such as Environmental Public Authority and KFAS and Kisar when instead for the environmental, sustainability and even the wildlife?
So government is really trying to push awareness and is trying to educate the public in terms of what we have and ways to manage it. There are different events going on. Usually you'll see them in regards to the International Day for Biodiversity or certain other days around the year as they align with some of the treaties that Kuwait has signed up for. So these government organizations are trying to spread more awareness. They are trying to study the systems themselves. And we work together as an NGO, we work with them as employees. Our work is very similar, but sometimes we focus on different groups just to make sure we cover what needs to be covered.
Yes.
And we work hand in hand to move forward, because as the Arabic saying goes, translated, one hand can't clap on its own.
ايد واحدة ما تصفق, we can say all the time, one hand cannot clap, Sarah.
Yes, we're working hands to hand. So,
Yes.
Mr. Mohammed, been talking about the wildlife, how to maintain it, how to maintain our environment. What do you think about, let's say, the awareness, the amount of awareness we have here in Kuwait regarding about, let's say, the wildlife here, the animals here in Kuwait, especially among the children in the schools? What do you think about the awareness and how we can increase actually the awareness about that?
So I would say we definitely need more awareness. We need to be able to reach the public more. And this is why we do these kind of interviews. We want to be able to have communication with just the general public in ways that it's not scientific, because the public doesn't always understand these technical terms.
Yes.
So we need to simplify, and I think this is one of the struggles that some of us researchers have, is trying to simplify our work to the public in terms of giving them what is necessary, what they need to know, and how they can help researchers and how they can help the environment. So in terms of awareness, we do need to have more awareness, and going towards kids is possibly the best, because kids are very excited.
Yes.
Yes.
They absorb information easily.
And curious about that.
Very curious. They'll ask so many questions that we might not even have answers for or even thought about.
Do you remember one of these questions still into your mind until today? One of these questions?
I would say one of the questions was, how do hedgehogs have babies? Because we think about the spines and all of that.
Yes.
So it was an interesting question from, I think it was maybe a 6-year-old girl or something like that.
Nice.
And trying to explain to her that the hedgehogs are actually born with spines,
Yes.
but they're very soft, so it doesn't hurt the mom as she's breastfeeding them or rearing them. It was interesting to try to explain that to her.
That's amazing. So, Mr. Mohammed, how has your background in evolution, ecology, and biology influenced your approach to conservation work?
It's really propelled me forward. It's opened my eyes to a lot of concepts that before studying this, I didn't understand.
Yes.
So I would, even in high school, I wanted to be able to get into the environment. I wanted to understand how to plant more in the desert.
Yes.
But understanding what the desert is, how the soil interacts with the plants, and how it's different from location to location, was something I learned through studying. Going out into the desert, okay, I would look at sand and be like, oh, that's sand. I would look at a rock. I would understand that the rocks have certain minerals, have certain properties that certain plants like, others don't. So that helped me understand which plants I can put in this area and which plants I would need to move to different areas. And then it also helped me understand how I can use animals to dig up the soil for these plants, how these animals help keep these plants alive when I'm not around.
Yes.
If we were to revegetate the area, we would have something what we call a microclimate.
Okay.
So we might actually have rain near those revegetated areas, even if it doesn't cover all of Kuwait, but that rain would be coming out of the plants and dropping back down on them.
Yes.
So it's an amazing thing that I learned through studying.
Nice. That's why we're always saying, like, we're believing about people who's working in the environmental public authority, all the entities, we're believing in you all the time. And we mentioned, like, good times run very fast, Sarah.
Very
we didn't
fast.
fill the time today.
Well, I had an amazing time. There's so much more to talk about.
Yeah, when we talk about the environment, next time we have to join you, one of the reserves, like Jahra reserves and your area, we want to know more about the wildlife.
Inshallah, we'd love to have you.
It
for
was
sure.
an amazing interview, Mr. Mohammed, and thank you for being here in around Kuwait.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And also, if you want to say any last word in a brief, this is your camera if you want to say something.
I would just like to say, go out into the environment, look around you and try to keep it safe, and interact with what you have in ways that keep you safe, the animal safe, the plant safe, and try to conserve what you can for your next trip and the trip after that, year after year, generation after generation.
Next
That's
time,
really-
let's go with him next time to the wildlife.
For
Okay?
sure, for sure. It was really a golden advice, Mr. Mohammed. And thank you again. We really appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
So, dear viewers, now we reached the end.
We reached the end, actually. It was really an amazing episode, dear viewers. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. See you for next time and have a lovely day.
Have a lovely day with Mr. Mohammed Al-Saik. Next time we have a next distinguished guest. See you tomorrow.